All right, guys, welcome back to the Pocket Mads channel. It's Maddie here, and welcome back to Meta Monday, the weekly series where we analyze the Pokemon Pocket metagame and keep you guys up to date on everything going on in the competitive world of Pokemon Pocket. PMPT number 18, our weekly tournament series, the 18th installment, was this past weekend. Just over 800 players came out to compete in the first tournament since the release of B2 Fantastical Parade. We're going to go over the results of it in today's video. As you can see here on the screen are the final standings, but before we get into it, guys, you gotta go register for PMPT number 19 this weekend. Fantastical Frenzy, $150 cash prize pool. This is going to be Saturday, February 7th, 2026, of course, at noontime. Link to register down in the description below. And then also, before we get into the actual Meta Monday video, I gotta give a shout out to today's sponsor, Top Up Live. And Top Up Live is the place to go to top up on any of the, digital currencies you might need for virtually any game that you might be playing. We have a promo code that you can go and use in the link is down in the description below. That's promo code MADS, M-A-D-S, for 12% off your entire order. Once again, shout out to Top Up Live for sponsoring today's video. Let's get into the final standings, okay? Let's get into it, because I think a lot of people realistically did not assume. I don't know what people assumed, okay? You might think, hey, maybe Kangaskhan won, maybe Gardevoir won, maybe Mimikyu or whatever, might have won the tournament. Here are the standings, guys. It was Suicune and Greninja not only getting first place, but getting second place as well. You can navigate throughout this entire video using the timestamps down below. However, I would greatly recommend that you stick till the end of the video where we go over all of the actual metagame data. That's where we're going to kind of break down realistically what exactly happened at the tournament this weekend. Definitely the most interesting part of the video, in my opinion. So go ahead and stick around towards the end. But we have a lot to talk about here. I think the reactions from a lot of people were pretty interesting, pretty funny, right? A new set releases, a ton of new cards come out, and guess what wins the tournament? Well, it was Suicune and Greninja. We'll take a look at the deck lists in a little bit. Suicune and Greninja not only got first place, but second place. So both decks in grand finals, I believe, are the exact same 20-card deck. Realistically, the reason for that, if we had to just really talk about it, is Hydreigon. Hydreigon is the reason these days, over the last couple of months, why Suicune and Greninja ever wins a tournament is because of Hydreigon. And it's been this kind of recurring theme. We talked about it last week before Fantastical Parade came out. My number one meta prediction was that Hydreigon would be very, very dominant. I think, as it turns out, a lot of the new decks that they released into the metagame through Fantastical Parade, a lot of the new archetypes are, in fact, actually quite good into Suicune and Greninja. And they also gave us Protective Poncho. You might be wondering, how did Suicune and Greninja win literally just days after Protective Poncho was put into the metagame? Again, we'll break it all down at the end of the video, but just keep in mind, Suicune and Greninja saw very little play. To break this into, I guess, a comparison for you guys, or not a comparison, but just sort of to break down the information, the actual data. Suicune and Greninja was, I think, less than 5% of the entire meta share for this tournament. So something like Protective Poncho actually did its job. It deterred a lot of people from playing Suicune and Greninja. Less than 5%, I think, of the tournament playing it, yet somehow both of the players in grand finals were playing Suicune and Greninja, which, again, we can contribute that to Hydreigon. Shout out to the Hydreigon players for just feeding Suicune and Greninja week after week. I tell people all the time, there's really no reason to play Hydreigon. I don't even remember the last time Hydreigon won one of our tournaments. It might have been the second or third tournament after Mega Rising came out, months ago. But I think that's the only one Hydreigon's ever actually won. Every single tournament, it does quite well. There's a lot of players that play it, and then it just will lose at some point to Suicune in Top Cut, and then Suicune wins tournaments. So that's kind of just what happened. You might be looking at this what about all of the new decks, right? Oh, let's break it all down. But first of all, that's the gist of kind of what happened. Hydreigon was very well positioned. Suicune, because it lost to a lot of the new decks, however, beats Hydreigon, and a lot of people played Hydreigon. Hydreigon by far the most played deck this weekend. That's kind of what happened, right? Hydreigon filtered out a lot of the new decks, and then Suicune just beat Hydreigon and then won the tournament. That's the realistic explanation of what happened. But anyway, let's break down the deck lists here. I know you guys are all very interested in seeing Suicune and Greninja for the millionth time. But what you'll notice here in PXG Evan's deck, shout out to PXG Evan, by the way, And in fact, let's go back here and break down all of the players. Shout out to PGX Evan D from Mexico for getting first place. Peronito from not listed here, also 13 and 12. So they had the same exact record. Went to grand finals, playing Suicune Greninja. Shout out to him. Kid Angel from Italy, 11 1 and 2, playing Hydreigon. Shout out to him. Only Junsi from Korea, 4th place Hydreigon. Shout out to him. Supreme 13, another Suicune and Greninja here in 5th place from the United States. Shout out to him. Like DN was playing Altaria, so Altaria getting in here into top 8. Shout out to him. Elma Tador Peru. Can't say the name, I apologize. 7th place, Hydreigon, shout out to you. And then X Desta from Germany, also Hydreigon, shout out to him. And then a bunch of other players here. Froggy X Wawan was playing Suicune Greninja. Zelha from France was playing Giratina and Darkrai. That's another interesting thing to talk about here today, which will break it all down. Emperor from India playing Suicune Greninja once again. Susan, 12th place, the highest placing Magnezone Oricorio player. Shout out to him from Brazil. Sekiro, and I believe his first PMPT tournament, gets 13th place with Giratina Mimikyu, a very fun deck we'll take a look at. Shout out to him. Creamy Lotion, again, all of these players. Big shout out to everybody that placed within the standings. Congratulations to everybody. Thank you so much for participating. And again, shout out to all of the judges, casters, and moderators that make this all happen. Okay. Now let's get in, finally, to the first place deck list here, Suicune and Greninja. And you'll notice one thing for sure. The first thing you might notice is that this deck list is not playing any new cards. And to be fair, that's by design. I don't think the developers released a single new card in Fantastical Parade that was meant to be played with Suicune and Greninja or, improve this deck in any way. I think that they were very conscious to do that. In fact, in Fantastical Parade, they did the exact opposite. In fact, they gave us a card, multiple cards, in fact, that are really good into Suicune and Greninja. So no new cards here, no new anything about this deck. It's the exact same deck. And I think that's, again, a big advantage of some of these older decks as we go into the new season is that they're already optimized. People know exactly what list they should be playing for Suicune and Greninja, for Hydreigon, and people know how to play these decks, right? So that's an inherent advantage. Keep in mind, this tournament came out only, I think, 4 or 5 days after the set release, maybe less, maybe like 3 or 4 days after Fantastical Parade came out. So card acquisition might have been an issue. Not everybody had all of the new cards. That also could have played a factor for sure. So just keep that in mind. This was only a few days after the set released. So the metagame was definitely still in its infancy. But yeah, Suicune and Greninja, the exact same list that we've been seeing. Frogadier, double Water Shuriken, 1 Greninja EX, 1 Irida, double Cyrus, 1 Cape, 1 Mars. And yeah, this is the deck list. This is Suicune Greninja as it's been for the last couple of months. Definitely still one of the strongest decks in the game, but nothing's different about it. I'm not even actually going to pull up Peronito's decks because it was actually the exact same 20-card deck, I believe. Let's take a look at Kid Angel's deck from Italy. This is the highest placing Hydreigon deck list in the tournament. Again, 3rd place, top 4. The other 2 decks in top 4 actually were Hydreigon, which is interesting. So I believe top 4 literally was Suicune Greninja versus Hydreigon both times. Suicune beat them both times, and that's how we got double Suicune in grand finals. And again, that's very much the story of the metagame over the last few weeks, and no different this weekend. A lot of people playing Hydreigon, beats a lot of other decks, and then loses to Suicune, and then Suicune will win. That's always kind of what's been happening. But anyway, this is going to be the Hydreigon deck, a very interesting version of Hydreigon. No Indeedee, no Chinglings, just sort of 1 Absol, 1 Leap Over Absol, no Middle Evolution either. So just choosing to play a ton of trainer cards. One thing that you'll notice as another recurring theme throughout this entire video is that not many people were playing Chingling. I think if Chingling saw more play, the results might have been different. In fact, if you take a look at like the last, I don't know how many PMPT tournaments, but they've only been won realistically by Suicune or by like Chingling, Altaria, or Magnezone Oricorio. Like those are the only decks that have been winning our tournaments for the last couple of months, and that's for good reason. Those are the only decks that can really compete against the other top decks of the metagame. But anyway, double Research, double Copycat, 1 Cyrus, 1 Sabrina, double Candy, double Pokeball. There's an X-Speed thrown in here, a Lucky Ice Pop thrown in here, so that's sort of our healing card alternative from Indeedee. And then we have double Rocky Helmets to, again, boost the damage of Hydreigon. And let's talk about this deck realistically, because I do think Hydreigon is a very, very interesting card, but at the same time is a weirdly positioned card in the metagame. Definitely one of the strongest cards in the game, because it's a single prize Pokemon, and it can deal a bunch of damage, and it can, power itself up on turn 2. This is a Pokemon that historically has been very, very good into multiple and basically every Mega Evolution deck, right? Just Mega Evolution in general don't like to deal with Hydreigon, mainly for the reason that it oftentimes can't one-hit KO. They can't one-hit KO Hydreigon, and Hydreigon is a single prize Pokemon, so you're gonna have to go through double Hydreigons. It's just sort of the nature of these single prize attacking Pokemon archetypes. It's difficult for a single Mega Pokemon to get through double Hydreigons and then also have to get through Mega Absol. It's just the way that Hydreigon is positioned. It's been sort of the anti-mega deck for quite some time. However, just for the last couple of months, this is a deck that has a pretty poor matchup into Suicune and Greninja. I believe this weekend it had about a 40%. It was 60% to 40% into Suicune and Greninja. So 40% win rate's really quite poor into Suicune and Greninja. A big reason why I think the Hydreigon players lost both matches, actually, in top 4. But yeah, here's the highest placing Hydreigon deck, not even playing as Wylos, which is crazy to me because this is a deck that would just get shut down by Chingling. Like, you're not even playing your own Chingling or anything. Like, leap over Absol and no Wylos means you literally lose to Chingling. Fortunately for them, I doubt they even hit many Chinglings this tournament. I've been preaching Chingling for so long. Chingling is definitely, without question, the best Pokemon, like one of the best cards in the entire game, and it really should be played. Really one of the only things in the game that will give you an advantage into both Hydreigon and Greninja. So again, I really do recommend you play Chingling if you can. A lot of the new decks that people are playing with the new cards, they didn't play Chingling. So again, I think that's a big reason why the metagame sort of developed why it did. But yet again, you know, Hydreigon here getting in within top 4 and top 8, but not winning the tournament just like it does literally every week. I mean, Hydreigon is really the only purpose of this deck is to farm out all of the decks that can beat Suicune and Greninja and then lose to Suicune and Greninja so that Suicune ends up winning the tournaments. Like, that's generally the only purpose of Hydreigon in the metagame. It doesn't really do anything else other than that. So shout out to Kid Angel and Only Junxi from Korea. I'm probably saying the names wrong. I apologize, but shout out to them. Let's skip on down to Light DN, who is the highest placing Altaria deck, and this is 6th place. So the top 5 players here, all Suicune or Hydreigon. And again, let's take a look at Altaria, which really didn't see that much play this weekend. A lot of people playing new decks, not really that interested in playing Altaria, which is interesting. Let's take a look at the highest placing Altaria deck, which you might be like, well, you know, at least we got some Chingling in here, right? We were just talking about it. No. This is Altaria with basically every card imaginable other than Chingling. Again, I don't know why, but shout out to Mega Altaria. Still one of the best Pokemon in the game. Definitely still probably one of the best Mega Pokemon. Double Indeedee here, 1 Jirachi, 1 Tapu Lele, and 1 Rotom, 1 Speedlink Rotom without Arceus. We're just playing Mega Altaria with Indeedee and then 3 bench attacking Pokemon, which is really funny with Double Cyrus, which is a pretty fun strategy. We're kind of playing this similar to how we play Blaziken with like Heatmore, you know? So it's a very fun deck. 1 Mars, 1 Licia, 1 Cape, 1 Helmet. None of the new stadiums. None of these decks that we've seen so far are playing any new stadium cards, and you might be wondering why that is. And that's realistically because a lot of the top decks don't utilize the stadium cards. None of the stadium cards are that good into Suicune and Greninja, probably by design. None of the new stadiums are very good if you play them in Hydreigon, like by design. These are stadiums that are meant to buff decks that aren't already at the top of the metagame, which is why you don't see Suicune and Greninja or Hydreigon playing the stadiums. But Altaria is a card in a deck that would very much, utilize the stadium cards like pretty effectively, you would think. Both the I forget what it's called, but the one that buffs Stage 1 Pokemon damage by 10 and the one with Psychic Pokemon free retreat. So both of those cards are actually quite good into Altaria decks. This player choosing to not only not play Chingling, but not play any of the new stadiums as well, which is very interesting. So, and again, maybe these players just didn't have the new cards. Like, we don't know like what the situation is, but perhaps one of the more interesting Altaria decks I've ever seen. If this player was playing Chingling and Mars and just the normal Chingling Altaria stuff, he probably would have won the tournament, given the fact that all of the decks above him just lose to Chingling, which is pretty funny. So shout out to Light DN, shout out to Altaria. 7th, 8th, and 9th place, all Hydreigon and Suicune and Greninja. Shout out to these players, by the way. I'm just not going to highlight the decks realistically. I'm sure the Hydreigon decks are a bit different. Like this one here is playing the Indeedee and Nihilego. So this is more of a Hydreigon deck that we saw last season. So this is the other Hydreigon deck in top 4. Definitely 2 sides of the same coin here. It's just, we're like the other deck, cut Nihilego and Poison Barbs and whatnot. But I do like the Poison version of Hydreigon a lot, actually. I think it helps it into Suicune and Greninja a little bit. But we're going to skip on down here to Zella's deck from France. Zelha. Playing Giratina and Darkrai, because this is a deck, I think, realistically, that has been buffed pretty heavily by a lot of the new cards. Again, 10-2, so a very, very good record here. Giratina Darkrai. Let's take a look at the highest placing Giratina Darkrai deck of the tournament, because this is a deck that's definitely playing some new cards. We've now slotted an Indeedee into Giratina Darkrai, which again is very interesting. If you think about it, this is a card that actually does pretty well into Giratina Darkrai. If you play it. And what's crazy here is that this is a deck, Giratina Darkrai only ever plays Dark Energies, which is kind of crazy to me. I don't know if we really, I don't know, like if the benefit of Indeedee is really there, but it's very interesting to see. This is a deck playing not only one Starting Plains, but one also Peculiar Plaza. I did mention Starting Plains would be very good in this deck. It gives all your Pokemon plus 20 HP. Giratina can go to 170 with a Giant Cape. All of a sudden, Giratina has 190 HP, which is absolutely ridiculous. Darkrai will go up to 180. So these are really difficult Pokemon to deal with. And, at the core of the deck, it's still just Giratina Darkrai, the same as it always was. We are playing the two new stadiums here, one Copycat. Giratina Darkrai never saw play after Copycat came out. So now it's interesting to see we can play one Copycat in Giratina Darkrai, maybe making the deck just a little bit better. One Sabrina, one Cyrus, one Red, one Mars, a double Rocky Helmet with one Giant Cape, and then one Lucky Ice Pop. I think one Lucky Ice Pop is interesting, and I think that in decks that aren't playing a lot of Pokemon, it's actually somewhat worth it. I think this card is very much like a sometimes win you the game type card. If you get lucky with an Ice Pop, you kind of win. It's just sort of how it goes. Like, it's definitely an RNG card, but it's probably worth playing in a lot of different decks. I would expect to see more Lucky Ice Pops. On average, it heals for 40 damage, so most of the time it's definitely valuable, but sometimes they'll heal you for like 120, and then you win. So shout out to Lucky Ice Pop. Shout out to Giratina Darkrai. Traditionally, like back in the day, Giratina Darkrai actually used to do well into Suicune and Greninja. It was one of the few decks that had a winning matchup. I don't think now with Mega Pokemon per se, and Hydreigon specifically, that this deck would do that well into it. I take a look at this deck and I think, well, I mean, Giratina specifically doesn't really love Hydreigon. So I don't know, maybe you can cape in Starting Plains and still get the attack off, but a Charge 2 Hydreigon's going to absolutely mow through your Giratina, which is a very difficult thing to deal with, realistically, especially because we're playing Dark Energies in this deck, we can't attack until turn 3, sometimes like turn 4, which is absolutely brutal into Hydreigon. So, yeah, I think that's probably a big reason why maybe Giratina Darkrai is the best choice right now, but traditionally does well into Suicune and Greninja, which is interesting. Again, no Protective Ponchos in any of these decks. Why are people not playing Protective Poncho? Again, I just don't think they really need to. Like, I think not playing Protective Poncho was actually the correct call, considering only 5% of the tournament was playing Suicune and Greninja. Like, most decks were not playing Greninja, which is pretty funny, although in top 11, there were 5 Suicune players. So mathematically, Suicune absolutely dominated, at least all of the ones that made it into day 2. Let's take a look. In 12th place here, this is Susan from Brazil, the highest placing Giratina and, Oricorio Magnezone deck. And very standard. Again, no new cards here. I don't think Oricorio Magnezone got anything new that you would play. Some people were playing Kangaskhan in the deck, which is definitely fun. But, whenever you're playing a Mega Pokemon like that in your deck, it's as much of a liability as it is, like a improvement to your deck. It's the same thing with like Absol and Hydreigon. And in the face of Suicune, I think that playing a Kangaskhan in a deck like this is going to make it way worse into Suicune, just because it's a liability, right? For the same reason that Absol is a liability in Hydreigon, because they can just sort of ping it and bring it up and then the game's over. You know what I mean? So you don't really ever want Kangaskhan if you're playing Suicune and Greninja, and that's a matchup where traditionally Magnezone or Oricorio does very well in. But keep in mind, the most played deck this weekend was Hydreigon, so definitely not the best weekend to be playing Oricorio or Magnezone or anything like that, because so many people played Hydreigon, which again filtered out basically anything that would have a chance to beat Suicune, which is why Suicune ended up just dominating. So that, again, that's just the theme here. Why are people playing Hydreigon? I don't know. It was well positioned theoretically, but not to win. So what's weird about the results this weekend, and I did want to mention this because I think a lot of people think that Suicune and Greninja is like running the metagame. They really think that, but that's not at all what's going on. Again, only 5% of the tournament playing Suicune and Greninja, whereas 15+% of the tournament was playing Hydreigon. So like Pokemon Pocket always has what I call like the default deck or like the go-to deck, which like no matter what, like the majority of the people are going to play because it's just the deck that people consider to be the default deck. And I think that a lot of people have in their minds that that deck is Suicune and Greninja, but it really hasn't been. The default deck over the last like 2 months has actually been Hydreigon. That is by far the deck that most people play. For whatever the reason, that's just sort of how the meta is right now. So a lot of people playing Hydreigon, which again is really warping the metagame. And keep in mind, Hydreigon hasn't won a tournament, or at least one of our tournaments, in a very long time. Suicune and Greninja just won plenty. That's for sure. So again, I just don't know what's, I don't want to discourage anybody from playing a deck. It's just like, if you play Hydreigon, like the chances of you beating all of the Suicune Greninjas in bracket is just so low. Like it just doesn't make sense to me. So it is what it is. Yeah, that's the story of the meta. We'll break it all down at the end of the video when we take a look at the numbers here. In 13th place, we have Sekiro here, which is kind of the first new deck on the standings. This is Giratina and Mimikyu. And let's take a look at his deck, who was actually also playing Greninja. So this is a very fun deck. And I love this deck in a lot of ways. It is a Greninja deck with double Cyrus, so it's a little bit like, you know, it's kind of one of those types of decks. But Mimikyu, very, very fun. And a Peculiar Plaza as well, giving Mimikyu and Giratina free retreat. And I think that Mimikyu pairs very well with Peculiar Plaza because it kind of acts as like this buffer Pokemon. If it's ever leading off in the active spot, you don't really care about it. You just can let it take a hit and then retreat, and then they can never Cyrus it back up unless they have Greninja or whatever because it didn't take any damage. So it's actually a very valuable leadoff Pokemon as like a buffer, and it's also very valuable as a late game Pokemon, you know, after we attack with Giratina to come into Mimikyu, attack, tank a hit, and then attack again. That's 140 total damage. Very, very nice. It's a very good Pokemon here. Giratina, of course, you know, in a Psychic type energy deck, because this deck's only playing Psychic energies, is actually quite volatile because you can attack on turn 3 by doubling up on Giratina. So again, free retreat, it's really nice. Like you can kind of just let Mimikyu chill in the active, go into Giratina, start hitting for 130. If by then you get Greninja online, that's 150, plus you can Cyrus up whatever. It's a very sound strategy, a very, very quality deck list. I really am not surprised that Mimikyu was the most successful new card in this opening weekend because it really is a lot stronger than people gave it credit for. I know a lot of people want to play these like, you know, big mega Pokemon strategies with all these different cards incorporated, but something like a Mimikyu is definitely just inherently a very strong card and definitely a low downside to playing it, along with Peculiar Plaza for sure. One Sableye to deal with the Oricorios, and again, double Research, double Copycat, double Pokeball, and double Cyrus. They were playing one Frogadier and one Candy. So I mean, they did want to play around Chingling, which is interesting. I don't know if anybody really played Chingling this weekend, but one Frogadier, one rare Candy, and again, the only draw support in the deck is the Copycats and Researchers. But again, that's typically enough, oftentimes, to move through your deck, especially into things like Suicune and Greninja. So I really, really like this deck. I'm curious to see how the matchups were. Not only Sekiro, but a number of other players played it. I know a lot of people from the Pokemon Pocket podcast crew were playing it. So shout out to all of them, like Tilly and Erico and all them. So I think they did pretty well as a collective. We'll take a look at the data at the end of the video here. But shout out to Sekiro. Again, 13th place with Mimikyu Giratina. Definitely pretty interesting. The next thing that we're going to pull up here is King Solomon. So actually the winner of our Invitational tournament last weekend, 20th place from Puerto Rico. He was playing Kangaskhan Darkrai. So this is Daycare Kangaskhan, which I think a lot of people, and it was on a lot of people's radars as definitely like a top deck. And what's really cool about this deck is that, again, people know how to play it. Like the concept around this deck is sort of the same. This is a very interesting version of the deck now that I take a look at it. Definitely different, right? So we're playing Miltank instead of something like a Tyrogue, but we're playing Ilima. We're playing double Ilima, double Kangaskhan, Rocky Helmet, Heavy Helmet, Starting Plains. Starting Plains is actually, and Heavy Helmet is kind of a crazy tech with Miltank. We got to keep in mind. 110 HP, that goes to 130 with Starting Plains plus Heavy Helmet reducing damage taken by 20 is kind of broken, plus Ilima. And it's only a 1 energy attack, and it kind of ramps itself up in the active. A strategy like this is very, very, very interesting. One of my favorite things that I've ever seen. You will still get KO'd. Oh, no, you won't. So if you get Starting Plains Heavy Helmet, you are actually living an attack from Hydreigon, which is potentially the funniest thing that I've ever heard, like, in my entire life. Plus, you could attach to Darkrai. You could go Turbo into any of these Pokemon, so you can Man-Type onto Kangaskhan and get this going on turn 2. Kangaskhan, definitely a Pokemon that I think a lot of people were excited about and is definitely a strong Pokemon. I think that this has a lot going for it. Mega Kangaskhan is still extraordinarily strong. I just don't think it's that well positioned into Hydreigon. Again, most of the time, you're not going to be able to one-hit KO Hydreigon, and it's going to be really difficult for Kangaskhan or really any Mega to get through double Hydreigon. It's just going to be quite difficult, right? Most Mega decks like to have some pressure. They'd like to do something before they bring their Mega Pokemon in. Like, that's the core concept. Daycare never really worked that way. It was kind of about like getting up one big Pokemon and sweeping your opponent, but that's become much more difficult to do now with Suicune and Greninja playing Greninja EX and then Hydreigon having double Hydreigon. It's a much more difficult strategy to get around. Also, the prize math for this deck is very interesting because we're playing a bunch of single prize Pokemon and a Darkrai. So a Greninja Snipe to KO a baby Pokemon or whatever could win you the game. They could also target down Darkrai, so they don't even have to go through Mega Kangaskhan. There's a lot of gaps in this deck, but traditionally, Daycare actually did well into Suicune and Greninja in a really interesting way. Like mostly because you could just sort of KO Suicune and then carry through the deck. So back when Daycare used to see play with like Snorlax and Arceus or whatever, it actually had a winning matchup into Suicune and Greninja. So I'm curious to see if the Kangaskhan version also has a winning matchup into Suicune and Greninja. But this is, again, if you're not playing Kangaskhan like with Oricorio, this is sort of the way that people are playing it, which is, again, with Darkrai and Baby Pokemon playing like a Turbo Daycare version. Again, no Chinglings. I haven't seen a single Chingling so far here in the video. I don't know why per se, but, you know, that's just how it is. Maybe Kangaskhan. I don't know. I don't really know the reason. Marhadi here from Germany was playing Altaria Chingling. So listen, I see one Chingling here in 21st place. So shout out to him. I wonder what he lost to. He ended up losing to Wawa and Suicune and Greninja, which is, you know, kind of tough. So shout out to Marhadi here playing Chingling. Really the only player that I've seen so far. Maybe people were playing Chingling. They just couldn't make it very far. I just assume Chingling is very, very good in a meta that, you know, is basically all Hydreigon and Suicune at the top of it, but whatever. That's just me. Here is an Altaria deck that kind of makes a little bit more sense based off of the new decks that we got, which is with Training Arena. And he's playing Training Arena and Rocky Helmet. So one of the concepts that I had with Altaria, if I was going to play it, would definitely be with Training Area to bring that damage from Mega Altaria from 130 to 140, because that's a much different number. We can KO Suicunes without Cape. So if we're playing Training Area, you could kind of cut the Rocky Helmets per se for a lot of different matchups, and you could play something like a Protective Poncho to kind of protect your bench from Greninja, or you could play like Giant Cape to further boost your damage. Then you could play like a Red or a Giovanni to, again, then deal with Suicunes, even if they had a Giant Cape. So that's just sort of my first concept with Mega Altaria. I do think that the Chingling combination of Training Area and Mega Altaria is going to be very good into Hydreigon, and I think that it kind of has enough of what it needs to deal with Hydreigon pretty accurately. And Suicune as well. I guess, you know, whatever happens, like, you know, you're not guaranteed to win the Suicune matchup, even if you're playing Chingling Altaria. One red card, so no Mars in the deck, so that's also pretty interesting. I think this deck list is close kind of to what I would play for Altaria, but I do think that with the new cards, I think Altaria really is still the answer to play a deck that can both beat Hydreigon and Suicune and Greninja pretty consistently, and I think Chingling's at the core of that. I don't know if there's really any other deck that can utilize Chingling nearly as well as Altaria. You can play Chingling in any decks, but like playing it in Altaria is like exceptionally good. They're playing one Jirachi, one Tapu Lele, so no Indeedee in the deck list. This keeps the prize math pretty safe, so that if your opponent goes through a couple of single prize Pokemon, then they don't, or if they go through one single prize Pokemon, they can't like go through Indeedee to win the game, which is pretty cool. But again, you know, these Pokemon into something like a Greninja are also liabilities, so you might want to play something like Protective Poncho and Mega Altaria, maybe cut the Rocky Helmets for a Red or a Guzma, but then you get rid of the Rocky Helmet Chingling stuff, which is definitely really, really good. It's a lot of really useful chip damage. So Chingling as well, like into Suicune and Greninja, because they're playing Indeedee, like doesn't deal enough damage to counteract the Indeedee healing, which is why Rocky Helmet is so relevant. But if you're playing Training Area, I just don't know if that matters, right? The chip damage doesn't really matter because with Training Area, we're able to just hit for 140, which is kind of the number we want to hit. So I think Altaria has a ton of potential moving forward. I just think that the deck needs to be optimized with some of the new cards, and Altaria really should be able to deal with Hydreigon and Suicune pretty consistently, which is interesting. Next up here, let's take a look here at Hyped Puffer, because he was playing Leafeon and Ogerpon, which is probably not what most people expected to be one of the highest placing new decks in the tournament, but shout out to him. And again, we talked about this deck, I think on Friday, that this is a very consistent deck that is not only grass type, so we can hit these dark type decks for weakness, which is really relevant, but has a ton of HP going for it, right? Leaf Cape on Ogerpon is 160, Leaf Cape on Leafeon is 170, so we're able to live hits from virtually anything in the game, which again, very relevant. Leafeon has been dramatically buffed with boosted evolution EV, just because this is a card that can kind of get going on turn 2 very consistently. So Leaf Capes plus Erica's is a lot of healing. We even have Guzma, Cyrus, Sabrina, Copycat. It's got kind of everything going for it. You have bench damage with Pheromosa, you have small Leafeon to deal with Oricorio, and then we have Ogerpon, which means that we cannot get status conditioned, which is pretty nice. And Ogerpon is really not a bad backup attacker. Leafeon, if it sticks around for a couple of turns, can set up Ogerpon. And then, Ogerpon, 160 HP, and it's hitting for 120. It actually is a decent Pokemon. Like, this is a deck that doesn't seem incredible at first glance, but very, very consistent and can deal with so many different things, particularly Hydreigon, pretty effectively. So this is something that, again, we might have to keep our eye on. I don't know if this is a deck that does quite well into Suicune and Greninja just inherently, but it's definitely not a bad deck. It's like the new tempo grass deck. People might be wondering about Buzzwole as well. Buzzwole saw some play. It actually had a good matchup in Hydreigon this weekend. There's a Buzzwole down here, so this actually will be the last deck that we take a look at is Kaitsu from the Philippines, 32nd place, playing Buzzwole. And this is going to be Buzzwole with 2 Celesteela and just 2 Pheromosa, double Cyrus, double Lusamine. Similar to how we saw it back in the day, they're not playing starting planes to buff the HP anymore. They're not playing any stadiums. And again, there is limited room for the deck. They kind of slotted in 1 Copycat and 1 red card for some disruption, some extra draw support. At the end of the day, I think that Buzzwole is a deck that is actually really, really good into Hydreigon, but just sort of doesn't beat a lot of the other stuff. This is a deck that's going to struggle a little bit into a lot of the Mega Pokemon decks. It's going to really struggle into Suicune and Greninja just like it always has. Unless the metagame really shifts around a lot, I think Buzzwole, also not many people play Buzzwole. Like, we got to keep in mind, like, oftentimes the results of a tournament is defined by what decks see play. Right? It's very difficult. Even if a deck is really good or well positioned, if only like 3 or 4 people play it out of 800 people, it's just very unlikely that it ends up winning the tournament or doing really, really well. Right? It's just the mathematical odds of it. Right? So like when Hydreigon and Suicune does well, like sure, that's like 30% of the tournament, right? So like it's easier to sort of justify, or I guess to explain why those decks end up placing higher on average. But only a few people played Buzzwole this weekend. I actually really do like it. It's something to keep our eye on. Again, into Hydreigon, which right now is definitely the meta driver. It's the default deck currently, as we predicted. To be fair, guys, we literally predicted Hydreigon would dominate early in the season. When I took a look at all of the new cards, I was like, these cards are really good, but they all kind of lose to Hydreigon. None of them are going to be able to beat Hydreigon as Hydreigon is built. And that's, I think, what happened this weekend. Hydreigon was by far the most played deck, filtered out all of the new decks. And, keep in mind, card acquisition, not everybody had all of the new cards. Also, most of the decks have been not fully tested or optimized because we're so early in the season. So a lot of suboptimal decks for the new cards. And then, of course, Suicune and Greninja just sort of there still. You know what I mean? It's just there. So, again, that's the story this weekend. I think people are going to overreact. The comments are going to be hilarious. I was instigating people so hard. It was hilarious in the live stream for the tournament. Like, I was just in the chat because I wasn't casting, and I was just getting people so riled up because people were just like, in general complaining that, it was like Suicune and Greninja's in the finals. And I totally agree with that. But again, if you guys don't want to see Suicune win tournaments, then like stop playing decks that lose to Suicune. Like, that's the only thing I can tell you guys. And I don't know why. Like, I don't know why people continue to do the same thing over and over and then complain about the same result. Like that's what's going on. Again, people are justified and they can play any deck they want to play. I'm not going to discourage it. I'm just telling people like the results are just a result of what people play, like what happens. And like if people are playing the same decks, like the same result's going to happen. It's what's happened so many times is that Hydreigon, people play it. A ton of people play Hydreigon. It beats a bunch of decks but loses to Suicune. So Suicune wins. Like that's what happens. that's how it goes. But anyway, very fun tournament. If we go down in the standings, again, I don't want people to overreact because there were a ton of new decks. Like if we go down in day 2, we had a ton of representation. In fact, we had 32 different archetypes in day 2, which is, I think, an all-time record. So how do we explain this? The diversity of decks, the variance of different decks actually in day 2 was absolutely phenomenal. It's just that none of them performed that well because, again, like I think 30% of day 2 was Hydreigon. So at the end of the day, like unless you were good into Hydreigon, like you just didn't really have a great chance of going far in the tournament. So the only deck really that did have a great matchup in Hydreigon was Suicune, which is why the results are what they are. So when you take a look at the top of the standings, it does seem very linear, Hydreigon, Suicune, and whatever, some outliers. But if you go down, tons and tons of just different decks that are kind of new decks, right? Like Gyarados was in here, a bunch of Kangaskhan, some Obstagoons, some Buzzwoles. Like there really was like a wide variety of stuff here. Vivillon, Rillaboom, like there's a lot of really interesting decks. And we'll cover them later this week. Gardevoir down here as well. We're going to cover them all later this week in a video, but just keep in mind that, once you hit the bracket, like you're paired up against who you're paired up against. And if 30% of the bracket's Hydreigon, and you can't beat that matchup, like you're not going to make it that far unless you get extremely lucky somehow with the matchup spreads. But again, there really wasn't a lot of Suicune that's on play. And we'll break that all down here in the final stage of today's video, which we've been waiting for, which is the metagame analysis, the metadata breakdown. This is my favorite part of the videos because this is really where we kind of actually get into what happened. You know what I mean? Like the people just look at the standings and they think that that's the story. It's really not. So we're going to go into the metagame data. If you made it this far in the video, I appreciate you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's dive right in here to the metagame tab here. So here's the metagame for the tournament overall. These are the decks that people played out of 800 different decks. Hydreigon, Mega Absol here, 14% of the meta share, by far, in fact, the most played deck here. 53.5% win rate, that's 396 to 338. A very dominant performance here for Hydreigon. Hydreigon was the correct choice, realistically. I think that's why people played it. Not only were they comfortable with Hydreigon, they know that the deck is optimal, but they also knew that they were going to have good matchups into all of these new decks that people were going to try to play this weekend. So it was the correct choice. The second most played deck was actually Greninja Oricorio, which was kind of the premier way that people were choosing to play Oricorio because they were playing it with Kangaskhan. But again, keep in mind that this is a deck. You cannot play Greninja Oricorio and expect to beat Hydreigon. It's not going to work out for you. So while I really do like this deck, this is a deck that should do well really into Suicune, as well as other mega decks. You're not going to beat Hydreigon. Okay, so now that let's just take a look at this. The number 2 most played deck at 9% of the meta share. Very poor matchup into Hydreigon. We can actually check that real quick. We can see here a 34% win rate into Hydreigon, which quite frankly is pretty abysmal. In fact, a losing matchup into Suicune as well, which tells me that playing one Kangaskhan in these decks, because that's what people were doing. They were playing one Kangaskhan right here. Like basically every person playing this deck was playing one Kangaskhan. That also helps you, or not at all, into Suicune. So like playing one Kangaskhan actually is really hurting your matchup into Suicune and Greninja, which is pretty funny. Also, you lose to Hydreigon. So immediately, Hydreigon 15% of the tournament, the second most played deck, a horrible matchup in Hydreigon. So immediately you can see what's going on here. You can see the writing on the wall. Next up is Galarian Obstagoon. I had a play in this because day one of the metagame, Hydreigon won the first tournament. Or not Hydreigon, Obstagoon. It was the first deck that popped off and did extremely well. I made a video on it and I was like, this deck list is really good. As it turns out, also loses to Hydreigon. This is not a deck that likes to play Hydreigon here. A very tough performance, 6% of the meta share, 88 and 180. Okay, so the metagame kind of immediately developed around not losing to Obstagoon, which is pretty funny. But that's quickly what happens, right? Whatever deck sort of pops up initially and starts beating everybody gets just counterplayed to oblivion. Hydreigon here, 15% of the tournament, and Obstagoon unfortunately does not like Hydreigon in any sense of the word. A very similar deck, but Hydreigon, when it attacks you, it discards all its energies. Piers is not very useful into Hydreigon, that's for sure, which is pretty hilarious. So 32% win rate, absolutely abysmal matchup in Hydreigon. Also the third most played deck of the tournament. Again, I probably had something to do about that, but you know what? It is what it is. At the end of the day, like it popped off day one, so that's why I made a video on it. But I did tell people in the video that it probably wouldn't be something that sticks around long term, or it'll get counterplayed. So yes, the second and third most played decks, very bad matchups into Hydreigon. Okay, now let's take a look here. Suicune Greninja, actually the fourth most played deck, but only a 5% of meta share, guys. So people were saying Protective Poncho here didn't do anything. It actually did exactly what it was supposed to do. It made people not want to play Suicune and Greninja. About a negative 10 to 15% meta share drop for Suicune and Greninja than what we've seen previously. Only 5% of the tournament playing Suicune and Greninja. So Protective Poncho did its job. It deterred people from playing Suicune and Greninja. So shout out to Protective Poncho for dropping Suicune Greninja down to 5%, lower than we've literally ever seen before. However, those 5% of Suicune and Greninjas did quite well, 53.4% win rate. And again, a big reason for that is its matchups here into Hydreigon. If we take a look here, that is 23 and 16 in total, 15 and 8 into Greninja Oricorio. And then, not great. It actually did beat Obstagoon pretty consistently. Beats Buzzwole, beats a lot of the Kangaskhan decks as well. So, but loses to Daycare, as we see 2 and 6 into Daycare Kangaskhan, which is interesting. Quite interesting indeed. Loses to Oricorio Magnezone still, as we know, and then loses to Daycare Kangaskhan. So, the Daycare deck actually has some validity to it. 0-2 against Swampert. Yo, shout out to Swampert. But yeah, you know, farming a lot of the new decks that people are playing. Greninja Oricorio beats Hydreigon, beats Obstagoon. These are small sample sizes, but definitely also beats Buzzwole. So yeah, Suicune Greninja had a pretty good run this tournament. But keep in mind, I really, even though first and second place were both Suicune players, I do not think Suicune is nearly as well positioned. I think a big reason why its matchups, or sorry, its win rate was so high was because most of the tournaments playing Hydreigon, right? Like that, they're just sort of feeding Suicunes. Like, and as we saw in bracket, like that's why Suicune did so well in the tournament. I think that the 5% meta share was probably correct. In fact, it's just the issue with that 5% was that 15% was playing Hydreigon. So it's like, you know, they're kind of paving the way for those 5 Suicune players. For Suicune and Greninja to be both decks in grand finals and only 5% meta share is absolutely insane. And not even like the highest win rate either. Like, it's kind of insane. I want to illustrate to you really quick the win rates for Suicune here in day 2, which was 24-7. 24-7. So again, only 8 Suicune Greninja players in day 2, and they went 24-7 collectively, mostly into Hydreigon. So that's again the story. Let's go down here. Altaria here about a 50%, literally 50% here. I think that kind of makes sense. I don't know what people are really running in it, but interesting. Turbo Lightning Kangaskhan here, 40%. Again, you lose to Hydreigon. Daycare Kangaskhan, 40%. Again, you lose to Hydreigon. Magnezone Oricorio with Kangaskhan, you lose to Hydreigon. Buzzwole here, only 45% for Celesteela, but the Pheromosa deck, 52%. That's 64 and 59. Actually, a pretty respectable record here. Let's take a look here. 13-7, guys. Look at this. Buzzwole does beat Hydreigon, or at least it did this weekend, but unfortunately, you're going to lose to Suicune, and you're going to lose to probably a lot of other stuff, including Oricorio Greninja. That's probably something you're also probably going to not like. So that's the thing with Buzzwole. I think that it actually does have position here. What we have to talk about, okay, is that there will be a third deck, but that's really what the meta is sort of contending around, right? Will there be a deck that can slot in there with Hydreigon and Suicune as the third deck of the rock, paper, scissors? I think it's still Altaria, quite frankly. I think Altaria is just the best option to play if you're trying to beat Hydreigon and or Suicune, but there might be a really strong option. Could be Buzzwole, could be Kangaskhan, could be something that slots in as a deck that's really good into one of those two decks, but really bad into the other. So we have sort of this rock, paper, scissors cycle going on. Definitely something like that could happen. People playing Charizard here, you lose to Hydreigon. That's a 40% matchup here. Look at this Magnezone Oricorio, though. 60% win rate. So Oricorio clearly still a very, very volatile, strong deck. Magnezone Oricorio, incredibly good. This is just a strong deck. Beats probably most things aside from Hydreigon. So in a tournament where 15% of the meta is Hydreigon and Magnezone Oricorio has a 60% win rate, that kind of tells me everything I need to know, which is that this was a really strong deck. It's just unfortunately, you know, Hydreigon also really well positioned. So shout out to Magnezone Oricorio, representing only 2% of the meta share. Only 2% of the tournament playing Magnezone Oricorio, which is crazy to me. Definitely still the best way to play Oricorio. Gardevoir here struggled. Again, you lose to Hydreigon. Okay, that's the answer here. This is the reason why these. I'm actually curious about Gardevoir's matchups here. 2-13. 2-13 into Hydreigon. So basically an auto loss. Beats Obstagoon though, which is kind of funny. Decent into Buzzwole here. Tough into Magnezone Oricorios. Yeah, loses to all the Oricorio decks. So that's sort of one factor of Gardevoir as well. You lose to Hydreigon and Oricorio. That's a tough sell here. Did they even hit Suicune? I mean, we don't even have data on this matchup with Suicune because nobody played Suicune this weekend, which is crazy. Did any of these players hit Suicune the whole tournament? Am I missing it? They didn't play Suicune. Okay, so again, the 5% of the tournament playing Suicune, and the what percent of the tournament was playing Gardevoir? 2%. They didn't even hit Suicunes, so we don't even know what that matchup's like, which is crazy. So again, people, you can't, when you look at the results of this tournament, you can't overreact because there's so much that's going to change with the meta shares and the fluctuations of decks that's going to see play. The meta in 2 weeks is going to be completely different, and I say that completely different. Hydreigon though still existing. Suicune will go back up and play. Hydreigon will likely continue to see a lot of play. So it really just becomes like, what can people play into those matchups effectively? That's going to be what the meta turns into. Greninja Kangaskhan though, 44 and 32. So a good little run here for the 11 people playing Greninja and Mega Kangaskhan. And this is an interesting deck. Let's take a look here at the matchups. Still losing to Hydreigon, but kind of beating most other things, like doing really well. Losing to Chingling, so that kind of makes sense. Chingling's broken, guys. You should play Chingling. Also loses to Suicune, so that's a kind of a tough run, I suppose, for this deck list here. Did we even take a look? This is 8 and 3. This is a Moose, so literally just turbo water Greninja Kangaskhan is what this is. Okay, so that's interesting. This is a very strange deck. I don't know. Probably not a bad deck whatsoever. But again, how are we beating? Like, that's the question, is like, how are we going to beat Suicune? You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing here with this, is like, can we beat Suicune? Is that how it works? It's tough. You know, maybe you throw a Poncho in here and maybe you can beat Suicune. I don't know. Again, there's so many cards in the game that we have to just sort of see how they interact. Like, the results of this first tournament like mean so little in a way that I feel like is tough to explain to people. It's great that we had this tournament. It's really fun to see, and it's important information. It's just that it's just a stepping stone. Okay, like where we're going to be at in 2 weeks is so different. This is just sort of a quick little pit stop on the road to what this B2 metagame is going to look like eventually. And yeah, so that's kind of it here. Here's the Giratina Darkrai decks that went 44 and 27. So Giratina Darkrai did pretty well. Look at this, Altaria Chingling. 9 people played Altaria Chingling. They went 44 and 24. Maybe we should be playing Chingling. I just don't know why people don't want to play Chingling. Maybe I do get it because it's Chingling and it's kind of like, you know, do I really want to play it? But yeah, no, I think the answer is Chingling is legit. Let's take a look at Mega Swampert here. A lot of people played it, and a couple of people just went like 0 and 4, 0 and 6, like 1 and 7. I don't know if these are people that just stopped playing but didn't drop from the tournament, like that like is affecting Swampert's win rate. I think that probably is a factor here, so I don't think the win rate really means much. But let's take a look here at the matchups. Again, do we have? Yeah, it was 0 and 8 for missed rounds, which is, you know, definitely hurting its record a little bit. So its most common matchup was Magnezone or Oricorio. How did that happen? So the Swampert player seemingly got very unlucky. Its most common matchups right now in the game, or this weekend, were Oricorio. So this data here is very skewed and actually quite hilarious. So loses to basically all of these lightning type Oricorio decks, but actually 2-0 into Suicune, 2-0 into Obstagoon, 2-0 into Blacephalon, Entei. I don't even know what these matchups are. Like, again, the small sample sizes means that like you don't really know what the decks are going to run into, which is always pretty funny. Let's filter by win rate here and just find any standouts. Like this one Vivillon Rillaboom deck is pretty cool. Yeah, so it's like Turbo. I don't even know what this is, dude. Like, what is this deck? So it's like Captivating Rillaboom and then Vivid Powder, so Poison and Sleep. That's crazy, dude. Growth Extract, Rillaboom. Yeah, that's a crazy deck. That's just a sleep stall deck. I don't even know. There was one person playing double Mewtwo Gardevoir. That went 7 and 3. Magro went 7 and 3. The Leafeon Teal Mask Ogerpons did pretty well. Altaria. So like this was the highest win rate deck out of anything that saw a considerable amount of play. At least like with 9 people playing it was Chingling Altaria, which really is no surprise to me. 44-24. People are like, oh, we have to play Chingling. You have to play Chingling. I don't know what else to tell you guys, is that if you're not playing Hydreigon and you're not playing Suicune, like you have to play Chingling, because like those are that's the only thing that's really going to help you. If you're not playing the best cards, like play the card that's good into the best cards. Just play Chingling, I promise. Please just play Chingling. And also Giratina Darkrai, which effectively, I guess, is probably just broken still with the new cards. I think Giratina Darkrai has been dramatically buffed. In fact, I really think this is something that should seek some consideration. And then Magnezone or Oricorio, Greninja Kangaskhan, and then we get into, of course, Hydreigon Suicune. So, like, again, if we filter out all of the decks that people played this weekend, like, what is worth playing? Like, this Grass-type deck, this Leafeon Teal Mask Ogerpon, like, has some potential. But again, I'm looking at Chingling. Anything with Chingling, Altaria is probably the number one thing. Play Altaria, play Chingling, you're going to do well. It's going to rise back up. Giratina Darkrai, very interesting to me. Very, very, very interesting to me. Giratina Darkrai might be a factor if it comes back into the metagame. Keep your eye on that. Magnezone or Oricorio still going to be a strong option, even if everyone's playing Hydreigon. And then Greninja Kangaskhan. Well, Giratina Mimikyu as well. So, like, these are kind of probably the 2 new archetypes, I would say, that are probably going to be the most impactful, which is going to be Kangaskhan, but you're going to have to play it like you're playing Suicune. Just play Kangaskhan instead of Suicune, and you're not... So you either play counter to those meta decks, or you're trying to sort of fit the same niche as one of those meta decks, like Suicune, right? So Greninja Mega Kangaskhan is really good because it effectively is just Suicune, just a little bit different. So that's something to keep your eye on. If you don't want to play Suicune, maybe play Kangaskhan instead, and it'll function very similarly. And then Mimikyu. And Mimikyu, I think, does make some sense here. I wanted to take a look here. So yeah, so Jimbo, Erico, Sekiro. So 3 and 3, 5 and 3, 9, 2 and 1. Let's take a look at its matchups here. 2 and 3 into Hydreigon, 3 and 1 though into Greninja Oricorio, 2 and 0 into Daycare. Where's Suicune? Did they play Suicune? I guess, oh, right here, 0 and 1, I guess, into Suicune. So again, I think this is also a deck to keep our eye on. I think Mimikyu's broken and it's definitely underrated. More people should play it. So those are the big standouts to me in terms of the new decks, right? You either play like Ogerpon Grass Tempo deck, or you're probably going to be playing, you know, Kangaskhan, either Daycare or with Greninja, or Giratina Darkrai or Giratina Mimikyu. So like those are kind of, to me, in my mind, at least early on right now, are kind of the new progressions to the metagame. Buzzwole Pheromosa, also interesting. So don't write off Buzzwole Pheromosa. Gyarados here with Jellicent is something that also could kind of swoop in and, you know, maybe be somewhat of a player to the metagame. It's tough here because I don't want people to take too much into these results. As we just took a look at the Swampert data, it really wasn't actual data. Like most people just dropped from the tournament and stopped playing. And the players who did play ended up just facing Oricorio decks. So that's tough for them. But I think Swampert's also very underrated. It's just traditionally, it's always going to be tough into those lightning decks. So you got to keep their mind there. Let's take a look at the day 2 conversion rates and meta shares. Hydreigon about 30% of the bracket, 45 and 27. Okay, so Hydreigon was not only the most successful deck in day 1, but was very successful against the majority of these decks. And look at all these different decks, like 30 plus different decks here in day 2. But Hydreigon, the most played deck, 30% of day 2, and there's a reason why it kind of filtered out basically everything else. And ended up losing to Suicune and Greninja. The 8 Suicune and Greninja players went 24 and 7. 24 and 7. That's a 77% win rate. Kind of crazy. Magnezone Oricorio went 50-50. Altaria here went 10 and 7. Obstagoon struggled for sure. It does not like some of these matchups here. Giratina Darkrai 6 and 4. Anything else is a big standout here? I guess, yeah. So the Giratina Mimikyu deck did pretty well in day 2. Leafeon, Buzzwole, Daycare. And yeah. So, I mean, that's the meta. That's sort of what, that's the results here. That's what happened. This was a long video. I do kind of apologize for it, but there's a lot to talk about. And I know people are going to overreact. They're going to be like, oh, Suicune won. But what's important is that you sit down and you listen to the whole story and you understand what's actually happening and not just, oh, the new cards suck, right? That's not the message here. There's so many other factors in play that I think it's important to understand. No matter what, people are going to just comment. They're going to see Suicune won and they're going to go down and comment and they're going to complain and they're going to give their opinions without watching the whole video, which again, I understand. It's a 50-minute long video, but I said a lot of things in this video that I think are very accurate, that I definitely really mean, and that I think are things that you guys should be listening to. So if you made it to this point in the video at 50 minutes or so, shout out to you. And then again, give me your opinion down in the comment section. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys for 45,000 subscribers. Don't forget to go register for PMPT number 19 this weekend. Again, I do expect the results to be very, very different than they were this past weekend. There's nothing else to do because rank doesn't come out till the 11th. So definitely go and do that. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Shout out to Top Up Live for sponsoring today's video. They paid to sponsor. Shout out to them. Yeah, we'll see you guys next time. We'll see you tomorrow, actually. See you tomorrow. We'll probably do our tier list tomorrow, which is going to be another interesting video. That's going to be an interesting one. But anyway, there we go. Peace out, guys. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later. Bye.